Which industry is more corrupt than anyone's ready to admit? The dairy industry. Every bit of milk is taken from a mother who has her baby taken away, and will have that cycle 4 to 5 times until her body is exhausted and she is processed. It's the complete exploitation of the female body and reproductive system. These mothers grieve, cry out, and chase their babies, which are often just taken 20 minutes right after birth. The male calves are raised for meat and the females are raised into the same system. I strongly dislike the dairy industry. On the other hand, milk, cheese, and other beef products are delicious, to be honest. Story 2. Big Ag. It's run by 5 corporations. They genetically modified the seed for resistance to insects, fungus, and disease, yet they make farmers spray pesticides like you butter toast. The money they make from seeds and pesticides is used to buy the Farm Board of the United States, which funds universities that specialize in farm ag. These schools insist on teaching farm agriculture as outlined by Big Agriculture. So, Big Ag wholly owns our farms and profits from every angle. For example, Bayer now owns Monsanto, the folks who made Roundup. So Bayer owns and manufactures Roundup, which, contrary to popular belief, does in fact cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, amongst other ailments. Now, Bayer also happens to have a pharmaceutical division. Guess what they make? A non-Hodgkin lymphoma medicine. Go figure. Story 3. The film and entertainment industry. No other industry has buses, trains, cars, boats, and plane loads of people going to a singular location with ideas of getting famous and meeting famous people. People leave their families and lives and move across the world hoping to make it, only to be misled and exploited in so many nefarious ways. After working there and briefly experiencing the D through A-list lifestyle, I concluded it's largely just a means to launder money. Individuals are most often exploited and some producers become involved in illegal activity. Extortionists and con artists selling their souls and everything that makes one human. The real currency that runs Hollywood is misery, and it comes in minute by minute via buses, trains, cars, boats, and planes. Story 4. Healthcare. It hides under the heartwarming guise of helping people, but in reality, it's a business built on people being sick. The vast majority of clinicians out there are well-intentioned and genuinely caring people, but the system is set up to be exploitative of everyone involved. Patients get stuck with giant bills, providers work extremely long hours, often wasting time on admin duties, and insurance companies make giant profits off denying care. Story 5. I listened to a podcast that had an episode about Christian music. The podcast is called Flightless Bird with David Ferrier, a journalist from New Zealand who does a mostly lighthearted show about American institutions and oddities such as homecoming, Olive Garden, emo music, train hopping, anything that interests him. In one segment of this episode podcast, David, who grew up a fan of Christian music back in New Zealand but has grown out of it, interviewed a talent manager who represents all kinds of musicians, including Christian musicians. He said the folks in the Christian music industry are the most corrupt and least likable in entertainment. He mentioned the huge amount of hypocrisy, substances, and several popular musicians have had criminal scandals and/or were hiding supposedly unchristian LGBTQ+ identities, but also the way the industry operates and treats and exploits the musicians. He described an industry where young people grow up playing music and singing in the church, and they're identified as having potential and coaxed into going on the road to spread the word, but really to make money for promoters and venues. One former Christian musician he interviewed described going on tour in a van for months as a kid with several men he barely knew. His parents went along with it because it was through the church. Story 6. Honestly, solar. I own a solar company in California, and the amount of ridiculously fraudulent salesmen and installers would blow your mind, all disguised as these born-again Mormons who would end each other for $200. It's honestly pathetic. Highly predatory deals that put a bad name to a really good thing. One of my favorite things about being CEO is going after every single crooked frickin' employee I've ever had to the full extent of the law, getting their license revoked and framing them over my desk as an example. I pay a bonus to any employee that rats them out with evidence. It's been highly effective in interviews. It's really not hard. Don't screw people, and you can make fantastic money in this industry. The fact that these people take this extra step shows how pathetic they really are. Story 7. Broadcast TV and radio in the U.S., especially radio, where almost every semi-relevant radio station in a major market is owned by iHeartRadio, formerly known as Clear Channel, or Odyssey, formerly known as Entercom. There's been at least 40 years of lobbying to relax radio station ownership limits, and the less relevant it becomes, the more stations the big corporations are allowed to own, and good luck starting your own legal radio station, as the FCC rarely assigns new broadcast licenses and the fees on top of the equipment are easily in the millions territory. TV is also heading towards this direction. The ownership limits for TV stations are a bit more strict, and there's a bit more diversity in ownership, but that's shrinking, with Sinclair and Nexstar being the TV equivalents to iHeart and Odyssey, respectively. There's limits on how many stations you may own, 39% of all viewers, and you can only own a max of 2 stations in each market, and until the late 2010s, you could not own a newspaper and a TV station in the same market. Station owners have bypassed this by creating shell companies and selling the station, or really its license, to them, while entering in an agreement with the shell company to operate the station's license. There's been efforts to get rid of this loophole, but since the FCC is full of corporate loyalists, these have all been shot down. Story 8. Real estate investment and development. It's more profitable for them to build units and never let them be inhabited so they can better control the rents, which are a side hustle. The real money is using property as collateral for loans that get invested. That's why executives pushed back to office so hard after COVID. It's because their property values decreased significantly, and companies use the leases on their buildings for loans all the time, and they need the illusion that the property is being used to justify the prices, when the truth is we need maybe a tenth of the office space we currently use, while residential rents are treated as almost a liability by investors. That's why everything is a luxury condo that nobody lives in. They get a couple of people in the building to justify the price and refuse to rent out the rest of them, usually under the guise of renovating them. Story 9. Behavioral health and substance misuse disorder services. Some of the billing and insurance stuff that goes down is insane. It's not just lower-cost clinics and facilities that this happens to either. Expensive private facilities and clinics have been caught committing fraud, and that's without going into anything like mistreatment or neglect. It's unfortunate because these are very needed services. The actual healthcare professionals are usually understaffed and dismissed if they bring up concerns. The clients don't get taken seriously when they bring up concerns during their treatment. A lot of clients, caregivers, and family members aren't informed on how to dispute anything with insurance, or to prove that services charged on the bill weren't provided, or to understand dealing with any kind of facility, hospital, or clinic, public or private. It's deeply disturbing how many people will avoid help because it's too expensive, or they've tried before and it's been unhelpful, subpar, or even traumatic, but that's really not their fault. Most people tend to get that healthcare has a lot of dark sides, despite there being a lot of amazing people working as healthcare professionals because of various financial reasons, but I don't think people talk about it in behavioral healthcare as much because there's still a stigma to seeking out help. These issues happen outside of behavioral health too, but it seems like it flies under the radar to apply the same concept to mental health or developmental disabilities or fixation. I'd really love to say the answer is just to educate everyone on the rights, how public healthcare or insurance in the area works, how to spot fraudulent claims, how to vet treatment options, how to advocate for yourself and patients if you're a provider, etc. But providers are understaffed, clients are dealing with an issue that they want treatment for because it's disrupting their lives, and caregivers and family are trying to help their loved one and navigate the system while juggling their own lives and responsibilities. It's just not realistic with what a lot of people have to deal with right now. I have no clue what the solution would be, but I do feel like this is missing from the everyone needs therapy takes that pop up on some parts of Reddit. Story 10. Egg industry. It rarely gets talked about, but it's terrible. The Martin chicken is producing an egg nearly every day, but in the wild, without human intervention, they produce 10 to 15 eggs a year. It's super taxing on the animal's body. Their egg production slows down at 1 to 2 years, and then they are terminated way before their lifespan. Also, the industry grinds male chicks because only females produce eggs. Not to mention 99.9% of eggs in the US are factory farmed where the birds are given less than 1 square foot of space. Story 11. Speaking from experience, the government contracting industry, though hearing that probably doesn't shock anyone. What I don't think people realize is the depths of unethical behavior that are completely legal and even understandable, happen every day, but are still wrong. Example, big, huge contracts are won by companies blatantly overpromising and intentionally underdelivering. A huge company will propose not taking a profit on a 5-year project for the first 3 years, which only a big company could afford to do. Then the accepted proposal explicitly states huge profit margins for the final few years that the government can't get out of. Meanwhile, the government employee who picked the winner probably got promoted for doing a great job making such a complicated decision, while also saving money in the next year's budget. Once they realize they're paying 2x or 3x what things should cost, that government employee is long gone, probably a director in another division. That's how we end up paying like $500 for a roll of toilet paper. And the smaller companies can't afford to make a gamble like that, so they never win. Story 12. Everyone's already aware that the health industry is corrupt. A common strategy to save money is delay care by making up self-made timelines. You want an answer on if your medication is covered? Wait 30 to 90 days. Want to appeal the decision? Sorry, you missed the 7-day deadline. Everyone is aware this goes on, and yet we all pretend it is still better than if we were to cut out the middleman and have a single government-run system. But no, let's let people profit off of illness and override your doctor. Story 13. The music industry. We all love music, but it's not all that pure. And I don't just mean at the high record executive level. I'm talking about your local venues when they have two sets of books, the mid-sized venues and music festivals where the promoters themselves are also funneling substances into the venues. I still love music and live music too. Story 14. Food packaging. I never worked at a factory that properly obeyed hygiene or food safety. The last place I worked had spiders in the airtight, sterile packing room. They are too cheap to buy filter replacements, so I just had to try and get it as clean as possible with a hose and vacuum cleaner, which means they were moldy as heck. Cross-contamination is constant, one mixer for the factory, and it was impossible to clean because you're supposed to use an industrial gurney. Instead, we scrubbed it with dishwashing sponges that fell apart because they were too cheap to even buy steel wool, etc. Story 15. The pharmaceutical industry. You gotta admire it, honestly. Imagine selling something that doesn't actually fix the problem but instead creates new ones so people need even more of your product. That's not medicine, that's subscription-based health. Pain meds that end up making people more sensitive to pain. Quote, safe, long-term medicine that quietly wrecks your gut or metabolism. Antipsychotics that turn patients into diabetic patients too. Genius, evil genius, but still. And whenever someone asks, hey, why do cures keep disappearing but long-term treatments keep exploding? The answer is always, quiet, trust the system. Right, because nothing screams science like panic when someone asks for transparency. But sure, let's pretend it's all coincidence, totally normal industry behavior, nothing to see here. Story 16. Cellular, retail, and repair. Big carriers leasing phones like cars that don't retain their value long-term. Manufacturers making it difficult and dangerous, lithium batteries, to repair a device. Manufacturers removing components like the headphone jack. Software updates that screw things up until the software is steady. And by then, it's a whole new software package or phone. Screen protector companies charging $50 for a piece of glass that has a rating less than the Casper glass from Mobile Centrics, which is relatively cheap. iFixit having good tools and repair guides, but way too expensive on basic parts. Mobile Centrics and other parts manufacturers cheapening out on screens and just reselling return parts instead of actual warranty. Even water-damaged parts. Mobile Centric screens have literally caused phones to go bad because of their quality, same with batteries. Plus you get shops charging an arm and a leg to replace your screen. For example, $150 for an iPhone 11 screen, and the part is less than $14. The markup all around is atrocious with less and less quality overall. Not even including the unnecessary fees on bills, the ever-increasing costs, shady sales tactics. Know of a guy who told customers multiple times their PS5 was unrepairable, no charge. If they wanted, he would recycle it out for them and dispose of it. Worked 3 times and he fixed the consoles up, giving them away to friends and family as Christmas gifts. Story 17. The education textbook industry. The amount of money charged for new editions is insane, and it's all levied onto student populations as required reading. Sometimes even the professor of the course is on the cover or part of the faculty. Meanwhile, the difference between the 10th and 11th editions are negligible, but they iterate to discourage the used book market. It's shameful given that this is meant to be an educational resource for upward mobility, and the material inputs and overhead of producing a hardcover book isn't proportional to $170. It all goes to rights holders. I went on a campus bookstore years ago, and this really opened my eyes to how unethical the system is. Story 18. Stock market, specifically FINRA and other market makers. FINRA is supposed to be an impartial agency that regulates market makers, but it turns out they have for-profit shell corporations holding equities in the Cayman Islands, LOL. Market makers like Citadel and others also have arms of their company that operate hedge funds. There is a plethora of evidence they use legal gray areas and sometimes straight-up illegal practices to help manipulate the books and improve equity positions they hold. Every once in a while, they would get a slap on the wrist fine that is just 1% of the profits the illegal trade made them. The scale of unethical behavior on the market is just unbelievable. Story 19. The medical industry, and 90% of them don't even know the extent of it or are even fully ignorant to it. Imagine a world where you go to the doctor and they actually tell you what is wrong with you instead of overprescribing to make your symptoms go away. Imagine not having your doctor look at you like you're being unreasonable because you ask him for a mold and heavy metal test. Like this information is recorded in our oldest documents and we can't get anyone to take it seriously in 2025. I'm pretty sure there are even Bible excerpts that speak of mold and its dangers. Imagine a world where we admit root canals are a dangerous practice and should never be done in modern medicine. Imagine a world where I'm not considered eccentric for regularly detoxing my body. This last one is probably normal in other countries, but not mine. Story 20. This might sound crazy, but the call center industry. They hire mostly people under the age of 30 and over 50 and take advantage of their situation that they need to make any type of income. You almost always work part-time, so you don't earn benefits, PTO, or sick days. They usually start you off about $1 or so above the state minimum wage, and any pay increase goes to the bonus program that you will earn as long as you do your job properly. Otherwise, you lose your bonus for the day, the week, or pay period. They create rules that are borderline illegal, like not allowing you to call off unless you speak to a manager and they think it is justified. They make it sound like joining a union would be worse for you. Most have heavy turnovers because of these issues, or you'll see the same person pop up at different call centers. That includes regular workers and those with managerial experience. They create a toxic atmosphere with favoritism and passive-aggressive behavior. Instead of addressing issues or HR violations, they'll fire the worker but then turn around and help that same person find a job at another call center. Some of the worst job experiences I have had in my life have been at call centers. Unless they have managerial staff that actually cares, it is a terrible place to work. Story 21. Oil and gas are being reframed as just hardworking blue-collar men and women who would save the Australian economy if only we'd stop building these dirty windmills. They're super profitable and efficient, but we're wasting all of our time and money building dumb solar panels that take more coal to build than they save. Well, okay then, if coal is so profitable, why is the taxpayer asked to spend billions every time a coal plant needs building? If solar panels take more coal to build than they save, why is the coal industry funding all these campaigns against them? You'd think if that were true, they'd love the future being made of things that are greedy for their product. There are barely any oil and gas jobs left at these offshore rigs. Entire gas fields are automated. Whole rigs might employ a dozen people. Billion-dollar companies have payrolls of just a few hundred people. There are no blue-collar jobs to protect. The industry harms our clean air for their own personal profits, and they do this by buying their own research that recommends limited emissions and by paying politicians to lie. The oil and gas industry is the original weapons-grade, straight-from-the-source corruption. It is the damaging influence on our planet and our kids. Sunlight and the wind are free, they're in the sky, all you have to do is catch them. The next time someone tells you these things are expensive, ask them how much a coal mine, associated refineries, waste dumps, and a coal power plant cost, as well as transportation costs between all of those things. You can try and convince me to spend billions of dollars digging up a rock, then billions of dollars to sort, grade, and refine it, and then billions of dollars more to burn it and then give you all the profits and a tax break because you employed 11 guys, or you can just catch the sunlight falling out of the sky for free. Story 22. Academic publishing. It's not necessarily corruption, but it is a really unethical system. Basically, researchers do all the work. They then send their papers for publication. Other researchers review their articles for free. And when the article is accepted, the publisher asks for $40 from each reader to read one article, and 100% of the money goes back to the publisher. The researchers who wrote the paper do not get 1 cent. It's one of the most profitable industries out there, despite being completely predatory. The thing is, researchers need to publish in specific journals to get tenure or to get funded, and so they are always trying to publish in the top-rated journals instead of publishing in open science venues. Story 23. In my country, police are some of the most corrupt government servants. They need to pass a very competitive exam to even be considered for the job. They need to pay bribes to the placement board after training and compulsory rural service to get a posting to an area of their choice. They need to keep ministers, politicians, and local gangs protected to keep earning extra money. After this, they expect you to pay at least $100 for every time they stop you in traffic. They are extremely arrogant. They have to work 12 hours a day and will take out their frustration on any common man who tries to get help from them. They will normally list stolen mobiles as lost so that they don't have to investigate and the crime stats remain in check. They normally, but reluctantly, help anyone who is well connected or can pay them something extra to do their job. They do not care about the common man and believe that the law exists only so that they can extort more money from the tax-paying citizens. Their motto is to demand money out of all the common men, intimidate the population, help only the rich and powerful, while not paying heed to the citizens' call for help. They are the Indian police. I believe most of the above rant will apply to many other countries' and states' police. Story 24. In Vietnam, being a school teacher is very prestigious and often very corrupt. I can't speak for the whole country, but in the north, people bribe to get the positions, sometimes more than a year's salary in advance. The pay is actually crap, a couple of $100s a month at best, but in public schools, you can receive all kinds of perks. Gifts and money on Teachers' Day and Women's Day, for example. But the real moneymaker is after-school tutoring. A public school teacher in Hanoi will have between 40 to 60 kids in a class. I've even heard of classes as large as 70 kids. Many teachers will intentionally teach the absolute bare minimum during school, knowing that they're setting the kids up to fail. They then graciously offer to teach supplementary lessons after school for a mere 50,000 dong, around $2 per student per hour. If 15 kids participate, the teacher can earn close to a month's salary in around 7 hours. They might charge more for older students. This is referring to elementary school. Kids end up finishing their academic pursuits at like 8 or 10 at night sometimes. Meanwhile, so that the teacher doesn't have a high fail rate, she encourages talented students to let others cheat off of their exams. Story 25. Megachurches in the US, these guys are stealing money hand over fist through the use of flashy sermons and trumped up versions of how the Bible actually works. Not to mention the fact that most of the donations they receive help the people that own the church pay for private jets and mansions. Even if there's a catastrophe in their neighborhood, they can't be bothered to send some money their way. After that last tornado in Missouri, a local megachurch didn't donate a dime. Meanwhile, a local casino donated a large sum of money to the victims. Story 26. Throwaway. I worked in a nonprofit circulatory fluid laboratory where we drew circulatory fluid and separated the components to sell to hospitals. Our machines were outdated, our protective equipment was lackluster at best, and we were constantly told to increase production despite the lack of staff. Absolutely no concern for our safety and the exhausting 13-hour shifts we were forced to work. Our normal shift should have been 8 hours. By far, our most profitable product was pooled platelets, since there are so many things that can go wrong when trying to separate them from whole circulatory fluid. In total, including bags, testing, processing, labor, and subsidizing products that didn't make it, the cost of the company was around $5,000 max per unit, and since it was a nonprofit, that should have been the cost to the hospital and in turn the receiving patient. However, the company would add costs that weren't incurred and sell the unit directly to the hospital for between $10,000 to $15,000. So yeah, that would be part of the reason why medical costs can be so insanely expensive. It's not necessarily the hospital's fault. There were a lot more corrupt things about this company, but this is the one that tended to get on my nerves the most, especially since the public face of the organization was entirely about saving lives. Story 27. Car dealerships, the buy here, pay here are the worst and will try and knock off heads as much as they can. They especially prey on people with bad credit or the ill-informed. New car dealers are not much better, bait and switches, mailers, and they will do anything to cover up mistakes on their end. I've seen many practices that are illegal, but either they don't get caught or the customer does not know the severity of the dealer's actions. Story 28. I used to sell textbooks for 10 years. First, don't buy the book and code. 90% of codes have the digital textbook on them. Cengage titles can be the exceptions, they may be code only. Second, never buy the new edition. Buy the custom or a few editions older if you can. Find it online, Facebook, Craigslist, OfferUp, BookScouter, then Chegg, Amazon. Best deals are found from people just getting out of the class. P.S. They only move around pictures, graphs, but word for word, that chapter will read the same. Third, the bookstore marks up the books by at least 45%, 20% to make a profit, 25% to pay back the school. I tried taking over a Barnes & Noble on-campus bookstore, but their contract with the school sucks. Finally, for this post, if you have to get the book, rent, unless it's for like Accounting 1 and 2, Biology 1 and 2, etc. Check the library. They keep a copy of all textbooks. Just ask your teacher if they have an extra copy. There's a ton more, but we're talking about textbooks, and I've already said too much. I'll never be cool again. Story 29. Furniture stores. The stuff is cut out of boxes, banged around, poorly assembled, and sent out damaged. As delivery drivers, we are encouraged to hide damages by placing items against walls quickly or using crappy furniture touch-up markers to make dings, scrapes, and bad woodwork less noticeable until 24 hours has passed, because after that you cannot refund or exchange. One day I was loading my delivery truck, saw a mattress with a hole in the bag and a big dirt spot on this $3,000 mattress. I pointed it out, they grumpily pulled it from the run and replaced it with a new one. 3 days later, the same mattress was back in my line to go out, hoping me or the customer wouldn't notice. The thing is, a furniture company subcontracts our delivery company, and if we, the delivery drivers, don't notice damage like the dirt mattress, and it gets to the customer's house and they notice, the furniture company charges our company for the entire price. We have to go over every centimeter of wood products because the people who work overnight in the warehouse placing it in our lines will bang up stuff and not mention it. Even the furniture store managers who hang out in the morning while we load up the truck don't care and do the bare minimum to fix beat-em-up items. They don't look over anything themselves because if it is broken, the furniture company pays for it. If we miss it, it goes out and the customer notices, we pay for it. It's just a win-win-win for them. The salespeople sell stuff way too big daily and have it sent out on our trucks. The furniture company makes a portion of the delivery fee and will just send it back out again to the next person they dupe. Also, if it gets damaged trying to deliver, they charge our company for the price of the item, then mark it down and resell it, essentially making double the money. They constantly have slightly damaged items on the showroom floor. People will see it and say they can live with it, except half the time, the furniture company will grab an even more beat-up model and send it to them, hoping the customer just assumes they didn't notice the extra scratches or whatever in the store. One customer was great because he was smart enough to take a picture of the coffee table he wanted that was in the bargain area. There were two sitting side by side. One was in bad shape, the other just a few scuffs. The mangled one was cheaper, but he went with the nicer one. They sent him, I almost 100% guarantee purposely, the inferior one after he paid for the good one. We happily loaded it in the back of the truck and called the customer service team for the furniture store to tell them they sent the wrong one. Lucky enough for me and my partner, we took photos ourselves of how it looked in the morning so the furniture store couldn't blame it on us and charge our company. That stuff happens a lot. An item is as is. We don't see exactly why, so we can't document it. Try to deliver it to the customer, won't fit, comes back in the truck. The managers see the scrape that landed it in the as is section, blame us and charge the company because they don't keep any documents on what was specifically wrong with the item. Story 30. Biomedical research. It's not so much that no cures and or treatments are being developed, it's that scientists get too competitive to be objective anymore. I've seen scientists look at the many publications a rival has and call all of it untrue on the grounds that the rival's hypothesis doesn't agree with theirs and will refuse to ask the question of why it's happening. I've seen scientists outright yell at each other dramatically at conferences over their work. There's also the mistreatments along the line that come with making it a competitive field. Students and postdocs having to be on so many psychotropic or self-medications to deal with cruel bosses is the rule rather than the exception. It gets even harder to stand up for yourself when your boss is an expert in their field. I have a friend who survived a health crisis a few years ago thanks to a PhD advisor that triggered it. Don't even get me started on what the desire for fame and funding makes scientists do. For example, there was a scientist who was suspected of being fatally harmed in Japan after he found his boss's data had been falsified and fabricated. They found a note, but the facts surrounding the self-incident made it highly unlikely that it was, considering that they found sodium iodide in the victim's system, which is a very painful and slow way to perish. Story 31. Financial advisors anywhere really doesn't matter if it's from an institution or a private firm. The large majority of them are only out there to get commissions and to protect their own bottom line. I was in that world for a while, roughly 5 years, and it is a lot less ethical once you realize that it's common in the industry to be 100% commission. From my personal experience working at one of the largest firms in the world, and they also tell you to tout that as a form of trust, I'd seen 13 different advisors commit fraud in a span of about 3 years, ranging from something small like missing a disclosure form, skipping over some small but important details such as surrender charges, to something as bad as forging signatures to start a sale in order to meet quarter-end bonuses. There's also some really bad ones such as straight-up lying to clients using the word guaranteed returns and other things that they ended up being caught with. All of these were quietly swept under the rug. You can go on Brokerage to see if they have any reports, but honestly, you only get reported for doing really bad things and if the client decides to completely follow through with the reporting, which most don't. And I can tell you from that search that those 13 advisors that I listed have nothing on their FINRA report. So they look clean, but I would think they are still doing the shady actions today as they were in the past. Regardless, not all of the industry is bad, but anything that relies on a person to literally make a sale or go home with nothing to eat or have a roof over their head, and people will easily bend the rules so that they can live, especially since most of these firms take roughly 50 to 60% of the commissions. So even if you make a big $3,000 sale, you're only seeing $1,500, and from start to finish in a pipeline takes about a month at the very minimum. And that's if they agree to invest with you on the first meeting because transferring money from institutions takes around 2 to 3 weeks. Story 32. Full-service brokerages, Merrill Lynch et al. I entered at Merrill for a few months, just long enough to pass the Series 7, 63, and 65, and then I quit. The doublespeak in those places is impressive, with the standing motto being, the secret to this business is sincerity. Once you can fake that, you've got it made. Don't kid yourself, full-service brokers and financial advisors who work on commission are not at all about creating wealth for you. They are everything about creating wealth for themselves and for the house. If you must seek guidance from a financial advisor, only use a fee-only advisor. They are paid a percentage of your portfolio, so they have every incentive to generate wealth for you. Story 33. Education, more specifically colleges in the US, the college experience is basically a marketing tool universities use to lure in kids who don't understand the severity of $60,000 plus of debt. Most universities don't even put a majority of their funding into education-related things. Universities will pour money into non-essentials like huge rec centers, nice architecture and landscaping, sport complexes, etc., just so their school attracts more students than the next, never mind the quality of the education. There's a Netflix doc about how major universities were accused of ignoring several essay cases because if the attacker were to gain publicity, the school might gain a bad reputation, among other unethical money-related reasons. So, save your money, go to community college first. Story 34. Third-party rooftop solar companies. In my line of work, I often see blatant lies about utility rate increase expectations from solar installers that are trying to sell a financial product with a yearly escalator supposedly less than utility rate increases that comes with the solar panels, and the problem is that utility rates often don't rise as much as the solar installers suggest they do. There are other issues like shoddy installations and the installers defrauding the government out of tax credit dollars as well. But none of this will ever see the light of day because righteous solar companies couldn't ever be corrupt, right? Story 35. Not really corrupt per se, but much of the pet care industry is flawed at best and cruel at worst. Fish and hermit crabs regularly perish of neglect and misinformation is everywhere. Both goldfish and hermit crabs can easily live past 20 years if properly cared for. Parakeets have the mental aptitude of a 2-year-old human child and should be given vegetables instead of seeds, room to fly, and plenty of toys. Larger parrots will begin to self-mutilate if bored enough. Hamsters are territorial and omnivores, meaning they will eat each other. All reptiles and tropical species, bettas, require a heat source. Birds and reptiles require UVB lighting. Mice and guinea pigs are social. I can go on and on. If you take anything from this, know that fish are, without contest, the most difficult animals to provide care for. You cannot just put a fish into a container of water and call it a day. Story 36. Textbooks/major mass publishers. Especially at the college level, colleges require general education classes that also require specific and ridiculously expensive textbooks. Publishers can hike the prices all they want because these students don't have many choices. They also change the text slightly between school years in order to secure the need for students to buy new books instead of old ones. The whole American higher education system is corrupt as hell, but the textbook industry specifically seems to be less in the spotlight. Story 37. Commercial construction. My God, has working in the general contracting side of construction opened my eyes about how things are? Apparently from my coworkers who have worked at multiple construction companies, it's the same everywhere as well. Let's just say there's always a bankroll job for a company that has deep pockets and doesn't audit anything. That job is used to fund a whole lot of things that aren't at all related to that job. Basically things like computer upgrades for people on other jobs, labor for a person who doesn't work on that job because the job they do work on is over budget and they don't want to keep sinking that ship, testing ground for new things that the contractor doesn't want to pay for themselves, etc. If you're ever in a position where you're overseeing a building getting built for your company, audit every goddamn invoice that comes through, especially if you're a big, rich company. Story 38. Sign shops and promotional companies. Sign shops will change you out to lower grade vinyl to save a buck and you will never know. Promo companies are basically a pyramid scheme made legit. Very, very, very few, almost none, actually make or do anything with the products they sell. They buy it all pre-made and imprinted from their vendors. Both of them are also infamous on the collection side for sudden closings. Owners will run up tabs with vendors, not pay employees or taxes, then file the corporation for bankruptcy and start a new one. Why do you think so many of them are like Promo Cells, a division of XYZ Corporation? Because then they can just become Promo Cells, a division of XYZ Corporation. That way they can keep their website and emails and other things. Story 39. Foster care. There are a decent amount of unscrupulous people who become a foster parent solely for the money. These few give only the essentials to the kid. This is so they're not in trouble by the state. Remember, foster care is actually a lucrative business. You can get at least $30 a day just for watching some kid that you don't care about. These few also pocket every check sent by the state that is meant for the kid. Clothing checks? Gone. Check to buy a $600 computer? They buy a stupid low-quality computer for $75 so that they can pocket the rest. Another example of these unethical people is from a foster brother I once had. He told me that the foster mother forced him to choose between living with her and seeing his grandmother. He was essentially forced to never see his grandmother just so he can have a consistent roof over his head. I'm sorry, but that's unacceptable. Lastly, nothing can be really done to stop this. The state only cares about ensuring the foster home completes a little checklist. Apparently, as long as they're not physically mistreating me or starting a child fighting ring, they're completely safe from the watchful gaze of the state. P.S. Not all foster parents are like this. I've been to quite a few different foster homes and have only witnessed this once. With that said, everyone, kid in the system, has had at least one such experience. It's almost like a rite of passage. It shouldn't be this way. A foster parent should care for you as if you were their own. They shouldn't treat you like a piece of money-making garbage. Story 40. U.S. government contractors. It's truly amazing how certain government contractors pass around the work. Company A has it this year, Company B gets it next year, and strangely enough, some of Company A's employees are now working for Company B. And the following year, it all switches back. And forget ever getting a job with a contractor unless you know someone. Most of the job postings are written expressly to fit a certain person who already knows they're getting the job. The contractor just has to go through the motions so it looks like there's a hiring process and not straight cronyism. Story 41. I was at the gym the other day and a gymnast there asked me about the daily work of a programmer. He was under the impression, like most people in my opinion, that we are out there writing inventive apps and startups or something. While the majority of the work done is in ERP, enterprise resource planning, accounting, and related business stuff, and involves a lot more public relations, consulting services, locking up customers, etc., than hacking and ingenuity. And in my company, there's also the EU R&D thing, basically projects where the EU spends a huge amount of money on stuff that may or may not really be useful, and probably not a directly admitted keep the industry going kind of deal. What makes those things kind of corrupt is that in theory, it's about research, therefore anyone that put the effort to win the research grant competition should get the money, right? Well, let's say there's so much unnecessary bureaucracy involved that you gotta have some capital and some connections to get in. And this also happens in general academia as of the last 1 to 2 decades. I'd also like to note that my company charges 60 euros per hour for whatever they're doing. That's like the money you give the urologist or even a psychoanalyst where I live. No way I am getting 60 euros an hour, taxes included. I hope the rest of that money doesn't just go to the bank account of my bosses. Story 42. Residential home builders. Total scam. You're paying an inflated price to several middlemen. The general contractor hires another contractor who hires a piecework trade to do the work. We charge the guy $500 to add a plug. The electrician used 10 feet of wire and one receptacle. Total cost with labor, $75. The average cost of a new home where I am is well over $400,000. Bare bones. You could easily build a house for $250K with land included. The excavation company was recently caught double dipping. They charged to remove the dirt they dug up, then move all the dirt off-site, and when it came time to backfill the foundation, charged to bring the dirt back. Total cost over $20,000 that gets passed along to the buyer. Story 43. Dang it, I'm so late to this, so I'm gonna get buried, but people should know anyways. Music streaming services have destroyed the value of music. They pay pennies for hundreds of streams and use a system called pro rata. The way Shopify, Apple Music, Tidal, etc. pay their artists is through this system. Basically, these services take all of their users' monthly payments and lump it together. Usually, the company keeps around 30% of that revenue. Then they take the remaining revenue and distribute it to artists based on their total streaming percentages. For example, say Lil Nas X accounted for 1% of all streams. He would walk away with $1 million from a $100 million remaining profit. This means that even a person who has the most niche taste and listens strictly to some underground genre of music barely anyone's ever heard of, his monthly payment is still funding mainstream artists like Lil Nas. He keeps those at the top richer and those trying to be discovered nearly broke. The best way to buy your music would be Bandcamp. They provide the most revenue for the artists. If you're an electronic music person like me, Beatport has the same prices for songs that pays the artist 3 times less than Bandcamp. Obviously, there's no going back to the days where you could buy albums off of iTunes circa early 2000s, which was the most profitable for artists. But if you truly like an artist, show your support by buying physical music like vinyls, CDs, or MP3 files. All in all, music streaming services have put an emphasis on passive listening rather than truly appreciating the art some musicians make. And rant. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. And if you like these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.